Chapter the 11th. Sports Go Sports. As November arrived, the weather took an extreme turn for the worst. Gone were the days where Harry would frolic in the posy fields after his lessons. The mountains around the school became desolate and icy grey, and the lake turned to chilled coffee. Every morning the ground seemed to gain another few inches of snow, and were up to 43 inches now. Hagrid could be seen from the upstairs windows digging his way out of his hut each morning, bundled up in a long Dalmatian overcoat, rabbit fur gloves, and enormous dolphin skin boots, muttering to himself as he went. Quidditch season had officially launched. On Saturday, Harry would be playing in his first match after weeks of endless training, Gryffindor versus Slytherin. If Gryffindor won, they would be guaranteed to be second place in the house championship after just one game. Hardly anyone had seen Harry play because Wood had decided that, as their secret weapon, Harry should be kept secret. But the news that he was a masturbator had leaked out somehow. Harry figured it was wrong, as he had a tendency to blab about Harry's secrets and knew all about Harry being a masturbator. He even snuck out and watched Harry practice a few times. Harry didn't know which was worse, people telling him he'll be great at masturbating, or people giving him a noose and saying to get it over with beforehand. Harry did gain some leverage over Hermione, however. After the troll incident, he approached her with a proposal. She'd do all of his homework, and in return he will act as her friend. She was ever so pleased to do this. He didn't know how he'd have gotten through all his assignments without her, what with all the last-minute Quidditch practice Wood was making them do. She had also lent him Quidditch, Game of Death, which turned out to be a very interesting read. Harry learned that there were 12 popular ways of committing suicide during a Quidditch game, and that all of them had happened during a World Cup match in 1473, which went on for days on end in a horrible blizzard with unspeakable temperatures. That masturbators were usually the least stressed players, although most serious Quidditch accidents seemed to happen to them, that people died a lot playing Quidditch beyond the suicides, or sometimes would simply vanish and turn up months later in the outback or other random places. The day before Harry's first Quidditch match, Harry, Ron and Hermione were out in the freezing courtyard having a smoke break. They were standing around a trash can fire, trying to stay warm, when Snape traversed the yard. Harry spotted at once that Snape was struggling mightily with a limp. Harry, Ron, and Hermione moved closer together to block the cigarettes behind their back. They didn't want Snape joining in with them. Unfortunately, something about their guilty faces caught Snape's eye. He limped over. He hadn't seen the cigs, but he seemed to be looking for a cause to talk to them anyway. "What's that you have there, Potter?" It was Quidditch, Game of Death. Harry shoved it in his face to see. "Books are not allowed in the school courtyard," said Snape. "Give it to me. 50 points from Gryffindor." "She just made that rule up," Harry muttered furiously as Snape slowly hobbled away, laughing. "And what's the deal with her leg?" "Dunno, but I hope it's really hurting her," said Ron bitterly. Most of the student body by now had decided to continue to call Snape a woman. The Gryffindor common room was very crowded that evening. Harry, Ron, and Hermione sat together awkwardly in a window. Hermione was doing Harry's charms homework for him. "How will you ever learn?" she kept asking Harry, but by asking her to read it aloud when she finished, he thought he got the gist of it. Harry felt restless, jammed between the other two in the window seat. So he hatched a plan to get Quidditch, Game of Death back from Snape. Why should he be afraid of her? Getting up, he told Ron and Hermione that he was bored and would rather go ask Snape if he could have the book back. "Better you than me," they said together. Harry still thought that Snape might refuse regardless of what he said, but it was worth a try, even if it's just to get away from these two for a while. He ran down to the staff room, random people patting him on the back and applauding as he went, which he was used to this sort of treatment by now, and knocked. There was no answer. He banged a lot harder. Nothing. Perhaps Snape had just dumped the book in there? It was worth a shot. He pried open the door and peered inside, and a horrible scene met his eyes. Snape and Filch were inside, alone. Snape was holding his robes above his waist. One of his legs was bloody and mangled. Filch was on his knees in front of him. "Blasted thing," Snape was saying. "Never works when you want it to. This is the last thing I need after what happened to my leg on Halloween." Harry tried to shut the door quickly, but... Potter. Snape's face was twisted in fury as he dropped his robes quickly. Harry gulped. I want my book back." "Get out. Out." Harry left, before Snape could rip Harry a new one. He dashed back upstairs. "Did you get it?" Ron asked as Harry walked in. "What's the matter with you?" In a low whisper, Harry told them what he'd seen. "You know what this means?" he finished out of breath. "She's definitely all man. And he tried to get past that three-headed dog on Halloween. He's after whatever it's safeguarding. And I'd bet my nincompoop he let that troll in, to make a distraction." Hermione rolled her eyes. "No, he wouldn't," she said. "I know he's not very pleasant, but he wouldn't attempt to steal something from the Dumbledore." "Honestly, Hermione, teachers aren't paid that much. You'd expect them to pull off something like this," snapped Ron. "I'm with Harry. I wouldn't put anything past Snape. But what was he doing with Filch?" Harry went to bed, his head buzzing with the same question. Neville was snoring loudly so Harry couldn't sleep. He tried to empty his mind. He needed sleep, he had to. He had his first Quidditch match in a few hours, but seeing Snape with his robes pulled up wasn't easy to forget. The next sunrise came up very bright and was plenty cold. The great hall was full of the delicious smell of fried cheeses and the chatter of everyone placing bets on the day's Quidditch match. "You've got to eat some breakfast." "I don't want anything. Just a bit of toast," wheedled Hermione, trying to shove the bread in Harry's mouth. "I'm not hungry," said Harry as he batted Hermione's hand away. Harry felt terrible. In an hour's time he'd be walking onto the field to play a game he didn't really like in the first place. He especially didn't want to play today, now that there were new developments in solving what's behind door number 1. Or in this case dog number 1. "Harry, you'll want your strength," said Seamus Finnegan. "MBs always get clobbered by the other team." "Thanks for the reminder," said Harry, watching Seamus pile on the ketchup for his sausages. By 11 o'clock the entire school was out in the stands around the Quidditch pitch fighting the cold. Many students already contracted some sort of frostbite. Since the seats were raised high in the air, the wind chill factor was atrocious. Ron and Hermione joined Neville, Seamus, and Dean in the West Ham fan club section in the top row. As a surprise for Harry, they had painted a large banner on one of the sheets Ron had ruined in his sleep. It said "Potter loves pandas," and Dean, who was not very good at drawing, had done a large panda head underneath. Harry had revealed this secret late one night and regretted it ever since. Hermione had even performed a tricky little charm so that the panda winked every so often. Hagrid. Ron and Hermione really had to squeeze together to give Hagrid enough space to join them. "Was gonna watch from me hut," said Hagrid, patting a large pair of binoculars around his neck, "but then I realize I can see Newton from there." Meanwhile, in the bathrooms below, Harry and the rest of the team were changing into their scarlet Quidditch robes. Slytherin would be playing in green. Wood cleared his throat several times for silence. "Okay, men," he said. "Hey, what about me?" said Chase Rangelina Johnson. Figure of speech, Wood emphasized. "All right, this is it." "This is big one," said Fred Weasley. "The one I've been waiting for all my life." "We know your speech by heart," George said. "It's the same stupid thing every year." "Shut up, you two," said Wood. This is the best team the school's ever seen, simply because we have our new weapon of the gods, Harry Potter. We're going to win, and win big league. By the time the season is over you'll be so sick of winning. This I can promise you." He glared at Harry as if to say, "Or else." "Right. It's time. Good luck, and may the magic be with you." "And also with you," everyone replied except Harry, who did not know he needed to do that. Harry followed Fred and George out onto the field. All of the snow had been cleared earlier that morning by Larry's Dragon Rentals. And, while hoping his nose wasn't going freeze off when he hit the wind, heard tremendous applause as his name was announced. Madame Hooch was refereeing. She stood in the middle of the field waiting for Gryffindor to walk up, her broom in her hand. "You're late. Well, let's get started. I want a nice clean game, all of you," she said, once they were all gathered around her. Harry noticed that she seemed to be speaking particularly to Wood. Out of the corner of his eye he saw the flapping banner up above, displaying "Potter loves pandas" over the crowd. His heart skipped. He just knew he was going to regret that. Brooms at the ready. Harry scrambled onto his nincompoop 2002. Madame Hooch gave a loud toot on her silver whistle. 15 brooms rose up, high, high into the air. They were off. And the quaffle is taken immediately by Angelina Johnson of Gryffindor. "What an attractive chaser that girl is, I'd love it if she grabbed me like that." And Jordan. "Sorry, Professor." Lee Jordan was doing the commentary for the match, closely watched by Professor Hardcastle McCormick. "And she's really looking stunning up there." A neat pass to Alicia Spinnet and, no, the Slytherins have intercepted the quaffle. Slytherin El Capitan Marcus Flint gains the quaffle and off he goes, Flint flying with dragon rage up there. Keeper Oliver Wood dives, misses, Slytherins score. Slytherin's cheers filled the cold air, with moans from Gryffindor. Just as the Slytherins had scored, Harry dodged a bludger high above the match which almost smashed dangerously into his head. Then it happened. His broom gave an abrupt, unsettling lurch. For a split second, he thought he was going to plunge off it. He gripped the broom securely with both his hands and knees. He'd never felt anything like that. Maybe he'd been sent to factory reject. It happened again. It was as though the broom was trying to buck him off. Did Nincompoop 2002s suddenly decide to kick off their riders off? Did Harry make it feel bad somehow? Harry tried to turn back toward the Gryffindor goal posts. He was going to ask Wood to call time out, but the broom wouldn't budge and was completely out of his control. He couldn't turn it. He couldn't direct it at all. It was zigzagging through the air, and every now and then making violent swishing movements that almost unseated him. "Now what do ya suppose Harry's doing? Is that some sort of new strategy?" Hagrid mumbled. He stared through his binoculars. "If I did know better, I'd say he'd lost control of his broom." Suddenly, people were pointing up at Harry all over the stands. His broom had started to roll over and over, with him only just managing to hold on. Then it continued to zig and zag all over the place once more. Hagrid said, his voice soft. "Something funny's afoot. Can't nothing interfere with a broomstick except deeply powerful dark magic." At these words, Hormone snatched Hagrid's binoculars, but instead of looking up at Harry, she started frantically panning at the crowd. "What are you doing?" moaned Ron, grey-faced. "I knew it," Hormone gasped. "Snape, look." Ron grabbed the binoculars. Snape was in the middle of the stands opposite them. He had his eyes fixed on Harry and was muttering non-stop under his breath. "He's doing something, jinxing the broom," said Hormone. "What should we do?" "Leave it to me." "Where do you think you're going?" "Harry will be dead by the time you get over there," Ron replied. But it was no use. Hormone was already fighting her way down the stands. Ron turned the binoculars back on Harry. His broom was now vibrating so hard, it was impossible for him to hang on any longer. With the whole crowd on its feet, Harry was thrown off the sweep like a cowboy at a rodeo. Down, down, down he went tumbling towards the ground. A Slytherin, Adrian Pusey, had just landed to grab a drink of water when he was cast in shadow. He had just enough time to glance up to see what was causing this when Harry Potter fell squarely on top of him, breaking Harry's fall. Adrian lay on the ground twisted in pain while Harry lay a few feet to his right and felt fine except for a piercing sting digging into his back. Harry got up and looked at the ground. There right where he landed was the golden snitch, its wings crumpled to pieces nearby. He must have landed on it when he hit the ground. Harry picked it up, held it high above his head to show the crowd and yelled, "I've got the snitch!" with thunderous applause coming soon after. I, Harry Potter, will be the greatest masturbator the world has ever known. I, Harry Potter, am God. He yelled over the cheers and howls from the standing ovation. Harry never felt more alive. He didn't catch it, he nearly destroyed it. Flint was still howling 20 minutes later as they carted off Adrian to the hospital wing, but it made no difference. Harry hadn't broken any rules even if he did break the snitch's wings, and Lee Jordan was still happily shouting the results. Gryffindor had won by 20,700 points to 1. Harry heard none of this though as he bolted out of there as quick as he could so he wouldn't be mobbed by the crowd storming the field. He was now being made a cup o' strong cheddar back in Hagrid's hut, with Ron and Hermione. "It was Snape, I tells ya," Ron was explaining. "Hermione and I saw him. He was cursing your broomstick, muttering, he wouldn't take his eyes off you, and I don't think it's because he finds you handsome." "Rubbish," said Hagrid, who hadn't heard a word of what had gone on next to him in the stands. "Who doesn't find Harry here handsome?" Harry, Ron, and Hermione looked at one another. "I've got some dirt on him," Harry told Hagrid. "He tried to get past that three-headed dog on Halloween. It bit him. We think he was trying to steal whatever it's guarding." Hagrid dropped his cheese cup and it splattered all over the floor. "How do you know about Fuzzy?" he said. "Fuzzy? Yeah, he's mine. Bought him off a chap I met in the pub last year when he was just a wee little pup. Didn't tell me he was a magical abomination from an experiment gone wrong and would grow to 50 feet. But when the little bugger did, I lent him to Dumbledore to guard there." "Yes?" said Harry impatiently. "Now, don't ask me any more," said Hagrid gruffly. "That's top secret, that is. And I'm just terrible at keeping secrets." "But Snape's trying to rip it off." "Hogwash, Thiz," said Hagrid again. "Snape's a Hogwarts fellow, he'd do nothing of the sort." "So why did he just try and have Harry bumped off?" "Quite literally," cried Hermione. The afternoon's events certainly seemed to have convinced her mind that Snape was one bad dude on a murder spree for anyone who got between him and the thing Fuzzy was guarding. "You're looking at the foremost expert on jinxes, Hagrid. I've read all about them. So that means I know one when I see one. You've got to keep eye contact, and Snape wasn't blinking at all. I saw him. I took off to try and stop it but couldn't get over there before Harry fell." "I'm living in a cuckoo clock," said Hagrid hotly. "I can tells ye why Harry's broom acted like that, but Snape ain't no murderer. Now, listen to me, all three of ye, you're meddling in things that are way above your heads. It's downright dangerous. You forget that dog, and you forget what it's guarding. Leave that between Professor Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel." "Aha!" Harry exclaimed loud. "So there's someone called Nicholas Flamel involved, is there?" Hagrid slapped himself hard in the face.